So it's probably no secret that when it comes to Pixar sequels, they are kind of mixed in quality, at least according to the general public. In the past decade, when people talk about Pixar sequels, they usually come down to these critiques. They're either mediocre at worst, or okay, or even good at best. For me, though, it's a little bit more easier for me to impress, luckily for Pixar. For example, I actually enjoyed The Incredibles 2, and I actually really love Finding Dory, even more than Finding Nemo, which I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, but that's just how I roll. And in fact, there's a personal reason why I didn't like Finding Nemo, but we're not going to get into that today. So for me, at least, I actually like a lot of the Pixar sequels. Do I have problems with them? Yes, I do, but then again, no movie is perfect, and I do completely agree with a lot of the critiques that people throw at these movies that I just named. However, the movie that we're talking about today, for Inside Out 2, a lot of people had their doubts when it comes to the idea of a second Inside Out movie, because not only do people already have a high expectation when it comes to Pixar movies, because, you know, Pixar has been known to make, you know, all-time classics, and their sequels don't really live up to those classics according to a lot of people. So when the announcement for Inside Out 2 was announced, a lot of people just had their doubts, including myself, because when you look at the first Inside Out, it was pretty good as it was. We all thought it was like a good standalone movie, and there's no need to put a sequel to this, especially because, you know, if you see the actual movie, you know, it's just about emotions, and we just learn about these emotions in somebody's head, and that just sounds like the end of it. And at the time, it didn't really make sense to add on more story to Inside Out, especially because these emotions, we thought that they were set in stone, that we had joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear, and adding more just sounded ridiculous and kind of, I guess, contradicting to a lot of parts when you really start to think about, you know, why these emotions weren't present in the first movie. So lots of people, you know, had their doubts, and including me, especially because Inside Out, I already considered it to be one of my favorite Pixar movies, right next to Coco and the Toy Story movies. So it's kind of hard to really match up to the masterpiece that was the first one. But still, I had an open mind with this movie, and here are my thoughts about it after I went to see it. Overall, I thought the movie was great. I wouldn't say it's better than the first, more or less kind of the same. I mean that in terms of the movie's quality, it's about equal to the first one. I'm not saying the entire movie was just basically a copy of the first one. I mean, it did have elements that were similar to the first one, like how the emotions just got out of headquarters and they have to make their way back. But hey, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, because what this movie did with it was kind of clever, and it was pretty good, and I had a fun time with it. One of the new things that this movie has to offer are the new emotions. The star of this show is definitely anxiety. Besides Joy, of course. She's both brilliant as a character and also representation of the feeling of anxiety in general. She's a brilliant antagonist for Joy, sort of being a direct foil to Joy, because both characters try their best to do what's right for Riley, or at least what they believe is right for Riley. Just like how in the first movie, Joy tried to block out every emotion so then Riley can feel that one emotion that Joy believes is right, that being happiness. In this movie, anxiety tries to block out every other emotion that isn't anxiety. Her whole thing is that she prepares for the future, so then Riley can avoid feeling alone in high school. Because the conflict in this movie is that Riley is going to her hockey camp, and she becomes worried when it's revealed that her friends are going to be in another school next year, so she won't be with them. And this is the main element of the movie that really hit close to home, because this movie's depiction of the feeling of anxiety was pretty good, actually. I can speak from personal experience because I myself am a person who experiences a lot of anxiety, especially during my high school years. And even though this movie is pretty general with its depiction of anxiety, after all, since every person's different, everybody's going to experience anxiety differently. But I bet everybody watching can at least have one thing in this movie that they can relate to. Moments such as the anxiety attack scene, or the scene where Riley was hanging out with all those cool kids and tries to fit in with them by lying about her favorite music. Or even scenes where she's just self-conscious, like that scene where she's struggling to walk. It's kind of sad that that scene is kind of real. Those scenes, and probably several other scenes in this movie, is going to at least have one person to relate to it. And anxiety wasn't the only new character that was good. All the other characters were pretty good as well. My second favorite would have to be Ennui. I just really like her design because it's really fun. A little ironic that I say that, considering the emotion she's depicting. Either way, she's my second favorite. Envy and Embarrassment were pretty good too. But there's not much to say about them, especially because of the limited roles that they play in the story. Although, just to give them compliments, I like Envy's design as well, and Embarrassment has some funny moments, especially with his little dynamic with Sadness. Moving on from the new emotions, what about the older emotions? You know, anger, joy, sadness, fear, and disgust. How are they doing? Well, like I said, they were booted out of headquarters because Anxiety wants to take control of Riley so then she can do her job of keeping her safe. Even though this is kind of like the first movie, it really isn't considering the circumstances at play. For one thing, instead of joy and sadness, it's joy and the other emotions. Sadness is sent up in HQ so then she can at least somewhat handle Anxiety's mess while the others make their way back to headquarters, which leaves them for good character moments for the other emotions that we weren't able to see much from the first movie. Not only does it expand their characters, ironically in more of an emotional sense. I say ironically because even though these emotions represent just one emotion, like, you know, anger represents anger, joy represents joy, and, you know, etc, etc. But of course, they have their own range of emotions, which begs the question, do emotions have emotions? And do those emotions have their own emotions? And is it just an endless cycle of emotions?
Nobody cares!
I guess we'll never know. But even they have their own funny moments as well. I love the whole dynamic that the team has, especially when Joy was having her mental breakdown in front of them. It was a pretty funny scene, but it was also an emotional scene because it shows Joy's emotional side and the other emotions try to help her out, which is honestly a nice scene. Not because, you know, like I said, it was pretty funny at first, but it also shows how much of a team they are. They aren't just co-workers that happen to work in headquarters so then they can take care of Riley. They're also friends. They're also, dare I say, a family. And I like how this movie kind of expands on that a little bit with these little small moments that they have. There's a kind of funny and cutesy scene with Disgust and that one video game character. I thought it was a pretty fun scene. And I like Anger's dynamic with Pouchy. It was pretty funny, and Pouchy is honestly one of the best characters in this movie. And they ended up being friends by the end, so that it all works out. Going back to Joy, I like how she kept her growth from the first movie. She understands that every emotion is valid and that they are necessary for Riley's life and life in general. And even though she has this new mentality of hers, she also knows that when Riley's being harmed because of an emotion, that's when she draws the line. And that's the whole reason why she's stopping Anxiety in the first place. And yeah, I feel like that's a good balance of knowing when to come in and knowing when other emotions need to come in, and Joy's kind of handling it pretty good. And as usual for Pixar movies, the visuals are stunning. There are many moments throughout the movie where the visuals look super breathtaking, especially that scene where Joy and Sadness are in that belief system place, the place where it makes all of Riley's beliefs and makes her who she is. That was like probably one of the prettiest scenes I've ever seen in a Pixar movie in a while. And just like the first movie, they're really clever with depicting ideas of the human mind, like the brainstorm, like I mentioned, the belief system, the whole secret place. The secret place is probably like my favorite scene in this movie in terms of comedy because Pouchy just steals the show. And Boofy, I guess. Well, apparently Boofy is the same VA as Cooper from Trolls? Huh. That's cool to know. Side note, Riley is super real for still liking a show that's not really targeted at her age group, because same. Look at me, I'm 19 and I still like My Little Pony and Trolls. Oh, and if we're talking in terms of like pre-K shows, Sophia the First is still peak. Argue with me in the comments. Overall, I'm super surprised about how much I enjoyed this movie. Even more surprisingly, it's currently sitting above Frozen 2 in the highest grossing movies of all times right now. So it looks like Pixar is having a comeback, at least according to the general public. But honestly, it's nice to see Pixar having a win in such a long time. Even as someone who actually enjoys a lot of their movies, even the ones that a lot of people say are not all that great, it's just cool to see that Pixar is at least still has it in them. What do I give this movie though? I say I give it a solid 8 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's like just as good as the first movie. Anyways, that's it for this review. Tell me what you guys think of Inside Out 2. Did you guys like it? Did you hate it? Did you agree with my points? Tell me in the comments. It's nice to hear what you guys have to say. Anyways, the winged unicorn is going to fly away. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.